Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about growth ETFs. And with the market kind of up and down recently, you may be thinking, well, this could be a good chance to sit on some cash. Or it could be a great chance to buy things when things are on sale. I mean, I like to buy things when on sale, and it's great when these growth ETFs are down maybe 5, 6, 10%, 12%. You can now buy them on sale. And when they go back up, you can make some money. All right, but what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about some of the best growth ETFs on the market. Now, usually on this channel, I talk about QQQ, VGT, or SCHG, but I've got some other ones to add to that just so you guys can take a look at some other growth ETFs. Now, those are going to be like VONG, XLK, and IWY. Now these are some new ones maybe to you, and that's great because we're going to be talking about a little bit about these, and we're going to kind of break down which are the best growth ETFs that you could add to your portfolio. Now in this breakdown, we're going to be looking at the expense ratio, the dividend yield. We're going to be looking at the diversification and the performance over the last 15, 10, and 5 years. Now, the reason I say 15 years is because not all of these have been around for 20 years. So 15 years gives us a good bit of data to kind of compare all of these different ETFs. Now, dividend yield may not matter to most of you guys, but some of you guys may like the dividend yield. So we're going to have just a small little portion to our voting in our calculation. Now, we have a great graph to kind of show you guys how this goes. But first, let's get started. Hey guys, my name is Steve, and this channel is all about helping people to save more and invest better. And if you like this type of content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Right now, I'm trying to get up to 500 subscribers, and you guys could be the next one to help me push me over to the top. All right, so subscribe today and continue to get great content. All right, let's get to it. Now, like I said, I've got a nice chart, so let's go show you that nice chart. All right, so we have this nice chart of different growth ETFs. We've got QQQ, which is the Invesco QQQ Trust ETF. We have VUG, which is the Vanguard Growth Index Fund. VONG, the Vanguard Russell 1000. VGT, the Vanguard Information Technology Index Fund ETF. MGK, which is the Vanguard Mega Cap Growth Index. XLK, the Technology Sector Select Sector by Spider. SPYG, the Spider Portfolio S&P 500 Growth. SCHG, the US Large Cap Growth by Schwab. And IWY, the iShares Russell Top 200 Growth ETF. So that's 9 different growth ETFs that we are going to be comparing today. And like I said, we're going to be looking at the dividend yield, the expense ratio. We're going to be looking at the performance and the diversification. So let's get to it, and let's start off with the dividend yield. Now, when we're looking at dividend yield, we're looking at to see, which has got probably the top versus which has got less. Because those dividends, they could add up, and that's maybe something you may be looking at. For growth ETFs, we're not always looking at the dividend yield. We want to see what the performance is like. And so this is only going to count to like 5% of our calculations at the end. So let's take a look at it. All right, here's my chart of our dividend yield. And as you can see, QQQ does have a pretty good dividend yield. So it's got about 5 points. And we're ranking these from, there's 9 of these. So the top one's going to get about 9 points. The bottom one could get about 1 point. And VUG's got about 0.5, VONG's got 0.6, VGT 0.66, with XLK being 0.67, SCHG, one of my favorite ETFs, is a 0.43. That's okay. Like I said, you don't have to be looking for dividend yield, but this is just maybe something you could be looking at. Now, our next one's going to be expense ratio, and what I like about expense ratio is costs do matter. The more it costs, the less money you could be investing and making in the long run. So if you have an expense ratio of 0.20% and you had $10,000, that will equal up to about $20 for that $10,000. Now, if it was $1 million portfolio, that would be about $2,000 per that $1 million portfolio. Now, if we had an expense ratio of 0.04%, that would be about $4 for every $10,000 invested. And if you have a $1 million portfolio, it would be about $400. So that's a $1,600 difference between the two different expense ratios. So costs do matter. So we're going to be taking a look at which one has the best, as in the lowest dividend expense ratio, and which one's got the highest. All right, so let's take a look at our chart. All right, let's take a look at these expense ratios. You know, QQQ right here has got 0.20%. It's one of the highest on this list. And it's got about 5 points. But then you look at VUG, you look at, let's see, SCHG and SPYG both have 0.04%. So those are the highest. They'll get 9 points for those. IWY and QQQ have will have the highest expense ratio, so it's going to have the lowest points, and those will get 5 points each. Now the rest are pretty much under 0.1%, so they're in that middle range. You know, VGT is not beating XLK, and XLK is doing a little bit better. But that's okay. All right, so those are those on the expense ratio. Our next one we're going to be talking about is like diversification. Now with diversification, we need to take a look at a couple of different metrics. First of all, we're going to see how many holdings each ETF has. We're going to see how much is in tech and how much is in the top 10%. Because not everyone has the same amount. One could have maybe 500 different holdings, but only like 60% in the top 10%. So is it that diverse? Not really. But if you have maybe less and you have something that's got maybe like 50% in tech and maybe 50% in the top 10, it becomes more diverse. All right, so let's take a look at diversification and see which one is our winner. All right, let's take a look. All right, so here's our chart on diversification with QQQ having 101 holdings, 51.62% in tech, and 48.62% in the top 10 holdings. It gets about an average of 15 points. Now, VONG, on the other hand, gets one of our top ones, and that's got 398 holdings, 48.61% in tech, and 59.17% in the top 10. Now, it's got more holdings plus less tech. That's why it beats QQQ. But our top one's going to be SPYG. So it's got less holdings than VONG, but it's got less in tech and less in the top 10. SCHG is doing really well with 228 different holdings, 47% in tech and 54% in that top 10. That's great. Now, XLK, on the other hand, is kind of doing one of the worst. It's got 72 different holdings, 100% in tech, and 61% in that top 10, giving it a pretty low score of like 5. And so that's why we're trying to see which ones could be the best and which ones are more diverse. Now, when you see the more diverse ones are the ones that kind of have less in the top 10 and less in tech, and that's good because we're trying to see which is the most diverse. All right, so we have those points tallied up. Now, let's kind of look at the performance. Like I said, we're going to be looking at the 15 years, the 10 years, and the 5 years, because all of this matters. Like, you could have a great 5 years, but poor 10 and 15 years. And so, do you really want that? Well, that's the question for you. But usually, I want to see a great performance over the long term. Now, like I said, this is only doing 15 years because not all of these ETFs have been around for 20 years. Now, VONG on this list hasn't been around for 15 years, but it will come up to 15 years around September. So we have estimated what the performance is over the last 15 years. So let's get to it. Let's see which one is the winner. So we are here on our chart, and we can see that, you know, QQQ is doing pretty well with performance of 5 years. It's 23.79%. That's great. 10 years, 16.94%. And 15 years is 17.66. That is a great points. So it's got 17 points. Now our top two are going to be our tech ones, which is XLK and VGT. And you can tell that they have the best 5 years, they have the best 10 years, and the best 15 years. Now their 15 years is not, I mean, it's a little bit better than QQQ, but that's just great. It is a great ETF if you're looking for tech and wanting to own more and more tech. Now, one of my other favorites is SCHG, and that comes in, it looks like it comes in kind of third right behind QQQ. It's got 24.98%, beating QQQ for the last 5 years. Now, QQQ beats it in the last 10 years, but with 16.21%, it has got one of the best over the last 15 years. So that's great news to those people looking for a great ETF. So we have some of our top ones right here is VGT. Well, our top one is actually XLK, VGT, QQQ, and SCHG. Now we have all the performances lined up right there. We have those points tallied up. We have the points for diversification and some of the points for the expense ratio and the dividend yield. So let's take a look. Who is our winner? Let's go. Now what I did here was I made a little tally mark of which one is the best. And so we're going to divide this up by diversification being about 45%, performance 45%, yield 5%, yield expense ratio 5%. Now, not all of these maybe you care about. You may care more about performance over diversification. You may care about expense ratio over all of these. Well, I'm just trying to make it even and trying to figure out which one will surpass the other. So let's take a look at all of these, and I have all the points tallied up. And if we go all the way to the right side of, I've got it in green over here, what we have here is we have our number one's going to be VGT. Now VGT, like I said, is one of my favorites because it's a great tech ETF by Vanguard, and it performs really well with performance. Now the diversification is okay, the yield is pretty good, and the expense ratio is pretty good. So that's why it makes it number one. Our number two is actually VONG. That's because of the diversification part of it. Now it does really well diversification. It's pretty on par with SCHG with performance, and the expense ratio is pretty good, and the yield is pretty good. So that's why it makes it on this list. Now our next one would be SCHG. Now SCHG performs in all the great spots. It has a good performance. It's got great diversification and a great expense ratio. Now the only thing it doesn't have great, and that's yield. And if we just subtract kind of the yield out of this algorithm, it would be one of our top 3 growth ETFs on this list. Now QQQ comes in next with great performance, diversification, expense ratio, and a pretty good yield with a 15.8. So QQQ is up there too. So right there we have VGT, VONG, SCHG, and QQQ. Those are our 4 top great growth ETFs. Now, those are just some of the metrics that I kind of took a look at and saw that, these are some great growth ETFs that you could add to your portfolio. Now, let me know in the comments, what is your favorite growth ETF? Now, last week or 2 weeks ago, I did a video on dividends and I ranked them, and my diversification probably could have been a lot better, kind of like this chart. But that's okay. If you want to check out the video, I'm going to put it up here. If you want to check out a great video about some good growth ETFs like SCHG versus QQQM, which is a little bit cheaper than QQQ, I'll put that video right here. So check out these videos. Let me know what you think. What is your favorite growth ETF? Let me know in the comments, and I'll respond. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. All right, I'll check you guys later on our next video, and you guys have a great week.